Okay. Right. Are we there? Are we broadcasting? Are we live? Are we live? Okay. Are we all good now? Okay. Good to go? Okay, cool. All right. So you should see me on the bottom left corner. My name is Oliver Cook. I'm a 3D art teacher, year 1, year 2 here at Sydney. If you came to the open day last week, the online open day, you might have met me then. Here I am in the flesh, as it were. You can see me this time. So hi everyone. Welcome to our little workshop on 3D concepting. And let me just quickly change. So you should be able to see this screen in a minute. There is a bit of a lag, a bit of a delay, so I'm about 30 seconds ahead. So there might be a bit of a, yeah, there'll be a bit of delay. Anyway, so welcome to the workshop. That's my intro out of the way. And this workshop is going to be running for about an hour and a half, so we've got about until about 12:30. Now let me just point out, this is really showing you a technique within ZBrush, but I'm going to be talking about other stuff quite a bit just to kind of get going at the beginning. 2D concept art versus 3D concept art, that kind of thing. So this is what we're going to be doing. If you don't know ZBrush, if you don't have ZBrush, that isn't a problem, because I really want you just to kind of follow along and show you the technique. It's not about you creating anything so much. It's really about me showing you a technique that you can then just go away and use and utilize later on. So if you don't have ZBrush yet, that's fine. This technique doesn't really kind of cross-pollinate very well to other packages because they're handled in different ways. So it's kind of special to ZBrush in a way, but you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about as I show you, so it will become clear. Okay, so oh god, right. So you should see this screen here with the I didn't change the title. Hang on. Oops, sorry. Where's that gone? You should be able to see this screen here. Come on, PowerPoint. Come on. Okay, let's do that again. Sorry. There we go. So ignore this careers and games. Well, you can, that's fine. So this is what we're going to be talking about today, concept art. And we're going to be talking about what is concept art, 2D concept art versus 3D concept art. So utilizing 3D more in concept art in the industries such as film and games is becoming more common. 2D is still the dominant, still the favored route of creating concept art for games and TV and film, but 3D concept artists traditionally work in 2D, and concept art has been around for quite a long time before we started using computers. So we used to do our concept art on paper, but 3D is now gaining traction in the industry, and I'll show you some examples of both in a minute. Okay, and then we're going to go through silhouette and gesture, why those are important, and how they contribute to the design, and also how the design, your concept art design that is, tells a story. So we're really focusing on characters. More examples of those in a minute. And then we'll talk about thumbnailing. So thumbnails to generate ideas or to generate aspects of an idea, thumbnails in Photoshop, and then the technique. And I'll show you an example of that, live example of me doing that. And then a technique of doing the same kind of thing in ZBrush. So how you can utilize the same similar technique from 2D to 3D, and then taking it to the next level. So that's like then taking that early design, that silhouette, and utilizing that and actually creating a proper concept sculpt from it. Okay, I've got a question here. I don't know if you can. Sorry, I'm answering. Kazi has got a question. I wouldn't know actually. I've never. You possibly could. The trouble is you'd need to check that you've got enough RAM. ZBrush uses a lot of RAM, so you'd have to have a minimum of. I'm not sure if it's optimized to run on Surface Pro. As far as I know, it isn't. So you'd really have to just check that out online. And yeah, you know, you'd have to sort of look at the system specs for the Surface Pro 3. Be cool if it could. It possibly could. Yeah, so just definitely check that out. I'm not aware of it. So yeah, it doesn't run. I've got an iPad Pro, and I'm pretty sure it won't run on there. So ZBrush uses a lot of RAM, and I don't think it's optimized for tablets. And Surface Pro is a semi-tablet, semi-laptop. It's sort of hybrid in a way, but I'm not sure whether it will run. Okay, so that's worth checking out. Okay, so this is what we're doing, and let me just check one more thing. Okay, so you can see this all right. You can see this PowerPoint, so that's cool. So this is what we're going to be doing. So as I was saying, don't worry about actually creating anything today. This also, as a warning, this isn't a let me teach you ZBrush class. This isn't for how to get around ZBrush, how to create stuff in ZBrush, basics sort of thing. So I'm not going to have time to take you through, how do I sculpt on a mesh? How do I create a mesh that's sculptable? This just relax, watch the technique. We're not going to get into ZBrush straight away anyway. I want to show you some cool stuff, and then we'll go through it. So the idea behind the workshop is that you look at the technique I'm utilizing, and then maybe you have time. So take notes. I'm going to be talking about some certain specific tools in ZBrush, like the transpose tool especially, and that can be a bit of a tricky one because it's a little bit finicky, and there's a few sort of things you need to know about, so I'll be talking about that as well, so don't worry. Okay, right, so let's move on. So I'm going to get rid of this PowerPoint, and I'll show you. So I'm going to show you my portfolio a little bit more. Okay, so you can see this. Let me just check that you can see this. Okay, so you should be able to see my humble website. This is still very early stuff on here in a way. Cool, okay, good, just checking that. So I won't talk about this lady too much, but this is some of my work. This is actually she's based from a character from the first Star Trek movie called Star Trek The Motion Picture, way back to 1979. Quite an old film, and a very cool movie in a way if you're a fan of Star Trek, which I kind of am, but this model really kind of grew out of a desire to learn a package called Mari, which is a high-end film texturing package. But I also learned a lot about sculpting as well in this one, sculpting a likeness. And sculpting a likeness from a real living person, or living or dead person, from someone who's been in a movie and stuff, it's actually very difficult. And that's a workshop for another time, I think. But this is still a work in progress. The actual render isn't final yet. But this is all done in ZBrush and rendered in Maya, rendered in a program called, in a render engine called Arnold, and textures were high-res. So this is for a workshop for another time. So let's move on. Move on to this guy. This is my semi-undead astronaut, and here's another one. And these aren't really concept art. This is more kind of like a finished piece. and this was done. These both were done in ZBrush, and same kind of process: ZBrush and Maya, and rendered in Arnold. And also textured in UV. So they went through the whole production process. And this guy, the same kind of thing. These guys are from the same story, as it were. So this is an idea I've got for a film. I'm actually writing the script for this. There's another shot of him. And then this guy is also from another film. So this is just some of my work I thought I'd just share. Okay, so what does this have to do with 3D concepting? Well, let me show you another website from someone else. And I've recently, it's halfway through a course with this guy. So Ian Joyner is a artist working. He used to, I can't remember where he worked. But he's worked on a lot of films. He worked on Spider-Man, Godzilla, and lots of other work. So this is his website, so worth checking out, ianjoyner.com. And let's just go to his work page. And he's a bit of a champion. He's one of these guys who's kind of he's a concept artist. He used to be a 3D modeler, so he worked in the industry as a modeler, working in more production. But now he works as primarily a concept artist, and he's got a big background in many different disciplines, such as modeling in terms of clay, sculpture, animatronics, illustration, but he's been using ZBrush for about 10 years, and now he's really kind of a concept artist, but he's got a big background in 2D art as well as 3D art. So 2D art as in, standard 2D illustration for concept art. So he's got all sorts of crazy stuff on his website, and he's I've recently done a course with him on 3D concept art. So this is kind of some of his stuff is sort of some of the stuff I want to share with you. But as you see, he's got a combination of 2D and 3D, and so this is all 3D. This is a combination of 2D and 3D, and he does a lot of paint overs and that kind of thing. But he'll start off in ZBrush, and then he'll take it into Photoshop and do a paint over and that kind of thing. Okay, so that's his website, and I'm going to just kind of get up some other websites really quickly. I want to show you some other stuff, and let's just talk about concept art and what concept art actually is. So concept art is a part of the overall production process, if you're working in movies or games, but it usually takes part in what's called pre-production. So for instance, let's say we want to create a new we've got a new project for a new film, and we've got to design the characters for this film. So we'll recruit a bunch of well-known character artists or concept artists primarily, and we'll sit them down in a room and they'll start whacking out designs, concept art, and they'll come up with ideas. So if any of you have seen the latest Star Wars film, which probably you have, there's a great book called The Art of The Art of The Force Awakens, which you can buy. Fantastic concept art. So it shows you their thought process of actually designing the movie, where even at the very early stage, when they didn't even have a very kind of a very defined script at that point. No one really knew what the story was, but they said, okay, well, so let's start designing, coming up with ideas, generating ideas for the movie. Even though they didn't have and they were told, just go crazy with it, just go wild with it. So let's have a look at some examples of similar things. So MPC is a moving picture company based in London, and they have their own concept art branch or studio, or as it were. So they have a team of in-house dedicated concept artists that work there. Now this is cool. This is kind of the kind of thing that we're going to be looking at in 3D, and very similar to what kind of Ian Joyner does as well. So, and Ian Joyner actually worked on this film, Godzilla, and these are some of the early design concepts for the, I forget the name of the monster, but it's the guy, it's the big beast that Godzilla has to kill and fight and all that. I wasn't that impressed by the actual movie, but I was impressed by the effects and the ideas of the creatures. Pretty cool. But you know, you can see here a thought process that's going on to actually design this creature. So starting off very rough, with a very rough form, and we'll come back to this. This is kind of like a silhouette, if you like, very basic, and then kind of like doing studies based on that silhouette. So we've got, you know, let's try this sort of design of the legs at the front and the back, and then moving on to different color studies, still keeping though within that same silhouette. And then later on they think, oh well, you know, we need to make him taller. He needs to be less squat, more kind of taller, because Godzilla needs to, maybe he needs to be the same height as Godzilla, for instance. So they stretched him up and they carried on from there. So you can see, worth going onto this site, mpcart.com, and you'll see all of their amazing, this Edge of Tomorrow stuff is incredible. Some amazing art. Now this is great. Leading on to that is, you can see here that they're starting to use combination of 3D and 2D in their concept art. So we've got, you know, this is probably 3D, then with a paint over. I can tell it's 3D because you can see that this looks very 3D, this kind of stuff here, but kind of very rough, you know. And that's the thing with concept art. You can be as rough as you like if it's an initial idea, or it can be as finished as you want. It depends how far along you are. It depends on what they're asking for. So this is pretty mad. This is like a the concept design for one of the creatures, very early 3D mock-up, but very cool. And notice the silhouette of this guy. So very, very strong ideas. And I want to just show you some other silhouettes in a second. Okay. So some great examples of some awesome concept art. Very cool. So 3D, you know, starting to think about the design of the creatures that they're going to use. And then maybe taking it one step later and saying, okay, well, what's he going to look like? Color, we need to get some color on him. So this is a combination of 3D and 2D. So this is a paint over with a bit of maybe some photo bashing involved. Photo bashing is where you take some elements from photos, cut them out, and you bash them together. And it's a really quick way of kind of coming up with some cool ideas that way as well. Here's another sculpt, more of a just maybe a 3D render, maybe in ZBrush or Maya, and just playing with ideas. But you can see that how beneficial, and then this is more of a 2D thing, but you can see how beneficial, the reason that 3D is so useful in concept art, because at that early stage when you're coming with ideas, you can see your design from every angle, and you can then see how that's going to translate into the movie. Because the drawback of just doing everything 2D is, oh, it looks great from that angle, or it looks great as an illustration, but because it's flat, you don't get an idea of the dimensions that it's taking up in 3D space or from every angle. So that's the benefit of doing 3D concept art, is that a director can look at your design and say, oh yeah, okay, looks great, but we need to kind of maybe change it from another angle. What's he look like from the back or the front? How is it going to look? And the other reason that 3D art, 3D concept art is gaining traction is because it's very fast, and deadlines and pressure of production are getting more and more, you know, more and more shorter. So now artists have, you know, less time to come up with ideas or designs to show a director to get the approval. You know, it's like a director says, "Oh yeah, you've got a day to work on this." Oh, great! You know, whereas before you might have a lot longer. So this is Ian Joyner's designs for Godzilla, and this is concept art, believe it or not. And you can tell because, you know, there's a bit of 3D, there's a bit of 2D. So some really cool stuff here. Okay, so worth having a look at his site. Please do. Okay, hope you're all with me so far. Hope this is all making sense. Are we all good, Mike? I think we are. Okay, so let's move on. So that's some examples there. Let's go back to, now I just want to show you ArtStation as well. So if you are ever short on ideas, or you want to have good examples, a wide range of different art styles, or get inspired, there are two sites I want to recommend. One is ArtStation, and because you get a whole range of artists posting up different styles of their own ideas, and there's a mixture of 3D, a mixture of 2D, but I never fail to get amazed and inspired, and I'm really impressed by the huge range of ideas and quality of work that gets put on here. It's pretty staggering, actually. So you can see all sorts of different. This guy looks cool. He look great in 3D. That's awesome. So I want to talk more about utilizing nature, things that we see in real life, in concept art. That's a kind of quite an important thing. But go on ArtStation. If you have what's called artist's block, you're not sure where to go, or you can go on here and you can get really inspired pretty quickly. Okay, another good site I'd like to just share with you is Pinterest. Pinterest is, I definitely recommend, if you haven't already, setting up a Pinterest account. And then Pinterest is just incredible. It's just an awesome site for getting reference or tutorials. So as you see here, I've done a search for ZBrush tutorials, mech tutorials, because I want to do some mechs. So if you need help with your ZBrush, but if you're just gathering reference, I've got about I'm not sure how many boards. I've got 20 boards on here. I've got 65 followers. Cool. But I've got several boards on here. So concept art, sculpture, ZBrush toots, dinosaurs, topology. So well worth setting up a Pinterest account. Anatomy, for instance, so that if you need to get reference, or if you're just kind of like trying to look for ideas, that kind of thing. So a lot of like cool anatomy reference. Okay, what have we got? Yep, so I get asked this question a lot. So it's hard to say with my stuff that I just showed you, because I've lost my link. There we go. The question is, how long does it take you? It depends really. This guy would have taken, I think maybe, I don't know, it's hard to say, because I was working full-time and doing this guy in the evening. But with this thing, for instance, it can take a while because he's made up of so many different parts. So I don't know, I think I put in, I'd say about, and I was working quite at a relaxed, my own pace. I wasn't really kind of putting myself under pressure. So I wasn't in like a deadline situation. I wanted to get him done as quickly as possible. But I don't know, I'd say this guy took about 3 weeks all in all, maybe longer. But I was also learning new software at the time, so that kind of increases the time to, I was learning Mari at the same time I was doing this. So when you're learning software and doing work, that does also increase the length of time something can take. Once you've learned, once you've mastered a piece of software, then you can just go in and do work. You don't have to worry so much about, you'll become faster. So at that time, I'd say he took about 4 weeks altogether, about 20 days. But I learned a lot from doing him, because I was learning Mari, I was learning about the new texturing. I was also learning Arnold. This guy took longer because he's made up of so many different parts, and a lot of them are unique. These little bits and pieces here, and I was learning a few new tricks in ZBrush and that kind of thing. So he might have taken about 5 weeks altogether, because he's got so many. I was also changing renderers. I was using Mental Ray and Maya, and then I switched to Arnold, and I didn't know Arnold, so I was learning Arnold then. So he took a while, and also I was doing this when I was working, so it was a bit tricky. This guy didn't take so bad. His robot arm took a lot longer because I had to look to actually see how that his robot arm was constructed. So, and I had to do, and the reference images I had for him were not good. He's not finished either. He's still got some stuff. Also, did some procedural stuff on him, so it's learning some new techniques. Whenever I do a project, I'm always trying to learn some new software, so that's always cool. Okay, so I think I'm ready to start the go into the actual process. Let's go into, so these are websites I'd recommend you get set up with a Pinterest account. Check out Ian Joiner's, check out Effie's Bit, but I mean, there's no shortage of stuff online to get inspired by. There's just heaps out there. It's crazy. It's almost too much. When I first started, we didn't, there was no such thing as the internet, and there was no such thing as ZBrush, but Maya was around and 3D was around. But now, because of the explosion in digital media all over the place, games, TV, film, it's in your face every day. So there's just so many resources. I'm always finding new websites. Okay, so that's all cool as an intro. All right, let's go into some other stuff. So let's actually talk about how we start. Now, I just want to move that out there. Right, now let's just clear my screen a bit. And I'm going to show you a character. Oh, hello. We've got a question here. Are all your 3D, but you just... are they all 3D, but you... Yeah, so if you're not familiar with 3D and the process, what we do is we model in 3D, but then we do a thing called rendering, which is where we actually they actually get turned into 2D images. So if you're working in a film, especially, what you're seeing in the visual effects is people will work on 3D models and animation, that kind of thing, but then they go through a process called rendering where they all get turned into 2D images. And if it's a VFX film like Godzilla, for instance, that will then go through a process called compositing, where we actually composite or put the 3D element on the animation in with the 2D live action. So, wherever you see VFX, spaceships, and live action, or creatures, or whatever, interacting with a human, that creature is now a 2D image, but it's been composited against a live action backplate and lit appropriately so that it looks real. Okay, so that's a whole nother workshop. That's a whole nother thing. If you join AIE, if you become a student at AIE, this is a process. This is a process that we teach so that you understand how 3D becomes 2D. Okay, does that make sense? Hope so. Okay, cool. So let's move on. So what I want to show you is a very famous character, and I want you to tell me who this is. Quite simply. So here he is. Okay, does anybody recognize who this might be? And this is just a pure black and white. This is what we call a silhouette. But does anybody recognize this character? I'm putting the question out there, so I'm going to wait for the delay. But does anybody recognize, just by looking at this simple black and white image, who this is? I remember when I showed my first year students this, and I got about 10 hands jumped up, told me straight away. Okay. Wait for you guys to tell me. Should be pretty easy. I'm pretty surprised if none of you know. Anyone? Yes, so we have a winner, Joshua John. Boba Fett, of course. So how do we know it's Boba Fett? I mean, we know everybody. I mean, for one thing, Star Wars is pretty much ingrained in our culture, even into our subconscious. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because we're not even seeing anything apart from a black and white, a black shape, basically, on a white image. So what I'm trying to explain is that the power of silhouette, or the power of shapes, the power of form, is something very, very powerful that we utilize to in concept art to sell a shape or the form, whatever, or of a character. So we can tell straight away that this is Boba Fett, even though we cannot see anything apart from his legs and a head and his jetpack. Maybe the jetpack gives it away, I don't know. But you know, that's interesting, isn't it, that when we consider that a silhouette, and this is a silhouette, can tell straight away an entire character. So, and then when we say, oh, it's Boba Fett, we immediately think of Boba Fett, who he is, how he fits in the story, and all that. So, and it's also interesting because he's not one of those major characters in Star Wars, but he's probably the coolest, one of the coolest characters, and everybody loves him. If you've been playing Battlefront, Star Wars Battlefront, you'll know that he's also a badass hero. You know, if you can play, you can play as Boba Fett and kick ass. So let's move on. Let's show some other silhouettes. So this is designs from a game called BioShock, which I'm sure many of you will probably know and play probably. Let's have a quick look talk about those. So we can see that this is from BioShock 2. Again, very, very simple. But what we're seeing here is some very simple shapes, but we're getting the idea of this character, you know, the proportions of the character, what the kind of thing is. This one has a bit more detail than Boba Fett because we can see that there's, you know, some framework going on, weapons, and it's a bit more visible. Let's have a look at some other ones. So some even simpler ones. Okay, so very similar again to, I'm not sure what this is from, I just picked them up after doing an image search. But again, very simple, just black and white shapes, done in Photoshop most likely. And I'll show you the technique for doing these in a second. Here's some other ones. So playing around with different ideas, but really these are just like black ink blobs on paper, just to kind of illustrate how powerful it is, just to show silhouettes. So really when we think about silhouette, we think, oh yeah, you know, black on white, but what we're looking at are really sort of shapes. And we can recognize, because it's so deeply ingrained in our mental whatever, subconscious, we easily recognize human shapes, human forms, even though they're black and white. We don't see any details, but we can recognize hands and legs and maybe make out a head. And because we're so deeply, because of our evolution or whatever, we can instantly recognize, you know, human form. Let's have a look at some more. So some of these are varied. So we've got some other ones here. We've got some different shapes, different characters. But again, all silhouettes starting to tell a story of our character, or a character. So the artist here, just briefly, I went with a silhouette approach to the design of the huntsman. It allowed me to think out of the outermost shape. When you omit innermost detail, you need to focus more on making the outer shape more interesting and unique. So this is why we do silhouettes. We're able to kind of not get bogged down with the actual details, just concentrate on the actual outermost form, the big forms. Okay. So, and here are some other examples. Okay. And here are some other simple ones. You know, very, very quick. Now, you know, doing these does take a bit of skill, I gotta say. But you know, here's the technique if you want to try at home. Just get my Photoshop on. And basically, depending on how good you are at drawing, you know, sometimes these are good, sometimes they work out. You know, it's not the be and end all, but it's a good way just to practice coming up with ideas and seeing what happens. There's a thing called happy accidents, which really relies on things that don't really happen when you intend them to, sort of thing. So, but then you think, well, oh, that looks cool. But silhouettes are basically just blocking out general kind of shapes, something like so. And this is very rough. I'm not even thinking about what I'm doing, but you know, when you're trying to come up with an idea for a character, something like that or something like this. Now, this all depends on your skill in drawing or whatever, or Photoshop or whatever. So not everybody's going to be good at this, but it's a good thing to practice and play with. And it's also very popular if you're a 2D concept artist, then it's a really popular way of quickly coming up with some cool shapes. All I'm doing is just kind of trying to think of some designs to come up with. And you can just do this if you've got Photoshop at home. You can just come up with some cool ideas. And you obviously, being in Photoshop, you can do a lot more with them. So, change the dimensions, that kind of thing, and the scale, blah blah blah. Okay, so this is a very popular technique that's used here with 2D artists, just to come up with ideas, shapes, that kind of thing. Mine are pretty bad right now. Okay. Yes, I'm using a tablet. I'd recommend using a tablet for any ZBrush work and any 2D work in Photoshop. Wacom tablets come in a variety of different prices. We've got the bamboo, you've got the the cheapy ones, and those are still pretty good. I would never use a mouse because you can, but mice for 2D work and 3D work in ZBrush is very important because you'll find it's a lot more intuitive, it's a lot more natural to it, more similar to actually doing 2D drawing on paper. Yeah, I'm just using black. Yeah, just black on white. You can also block out. You can change grey. Grey is nice to just if you just want to be, be a bit more experimental, just to kind of block out. Oops. And you can change the opacity. That's always fun. Just to kind of, because sometimes you can get some interiors. And again, the next stage with this would be then to add like a little bit of color. So, not color, but a little bit of shading. So a little bit of light to kind of bring out some details, or some surface form. So that would be the next stage. Would be say, hey, I like this design here. Let's take that one stage further, and let's start adding some little bit of light or something like that. A little bit of shading, a little bit of shadow, and you can then take it really further and develop a concept art from that. So, speaking of concept art, let's look at some examples of taking that next level in terms of 2D. So here's something I found. I thought these guys were pretty cool. Started off as silhouettes, but then were worked on some more in Photoshop and developed. And you can see very just black and white, nothing too elaborate, but then just going in, adding some details. I like these guys because I like the shapes, the proportions, and what we call gesture. And gesture is when you're kind of trying to describe the action and the center of gravity of the character, so the pose, if you like. So you can see these are all made up of similar gestures, but then playing around with proportions as well. So I really like these ideas here. I'm not sure who did them, but I think I found them on Pinterest. An example of very cool example of 3D concept art, and then you get rough drawings like this. So to very kind of just fine line work, not really silhouette, but an example of thinking mechanically. So that's another approach, more of a traditional engineering approach. So not really a silhouette, but we do have gesture in there. So look at the position of the legs and the perspective. Okay, let's rewind back to the 15th century. And speaking of gesture, this is a sketch by Rembrandt. You might know him, very famous. But he is a very famous Renaissance painter. And I love this drawing because, again, speaking of gesture, describing in just very, very few simple lines, 3 characters, and describing their actions. So what have we got here? And if you just break it down, it's just simple lines. It's pretty incredible. But you've got this woman, obviously got a child, and you've got another woman. So maybe they're looking after this child and saying, look, we're going over there. And she looks a little bit scared. And she's trying to console or encourage, and they're both holding it. But it's amazing because we can see straight away a story going on in just this very, very simple drawing. So this is what we're trying to do in concept art, is to sell something, not sell something, but to portray a story or a design very, very simply or very clearly. So, but I like this because it's just so simple. But we get the gesture, we get the arching of the back, but it's pretty made. There's another example here, not that one. That's not Rembrandt. That's Destiny, I think. And I'll come back to this one in a second. But we've got another one by Rembrandt. Just a few simple lines, and it's a woman having a nap. But again, I love this one. We get the gesture. We can see straight away. Looks like the arm here, and sleeping. By the way, she looks like she's sleeping. We've got the leg. We've got Rembrandt was such a master at drawing. He could just knock this stuff out really quickly. Obviously, for some people like us, my drawing skill is actually quite rusty because I spend all my time in 3D, and I try and get into 2D as much as I can. But you get, as you practice more, you'll get faster and you'll be able to. So it's pretty amazing when you think that in such a few simple brush strokes or pen strokes, you can get something as clear as this. So pretty incredible. Now let's go and just have a look at some more of these. So I'm just going to save this one, and I just want to see what else we got. Again, another company you can check out online called Massive Black. They're their own little studio, and they do concept art outsourcing. And they do a lot of stuff for all sorts of people. They've done stuff for Transformers, stuff like that. So here's a design for the Transformers movie, Transformers 2. This is their design for Megatron. This is 2D, obviously. Again, they did stuff for games, so they've got some concept art for their characters, and then we're back to this guy again. Okay, and then finally, this is a very recent design for Destiny. I really like their character design. They've got some really strong ideas, and I really like this one because, again, it's quite rough, but really kind of trying to do the giving you an idea of what's going on with these guys. They look like they're part of a. I've not played the game, so I don't know, but they're part of a faction. Maybe you have to fight these guys, or maybe you can beat them, whatever. But then you get this massive vehicle behind. So, but I love the design of these guys. Really big, bulky shapes, big, chunky legs, very chunky. They look like they mean business. So, concept art again, different style. Okay, so that's silhouette, and that's some more concept art. Silhouette, the importance of silhouette. So I'm going to go into ZBrush now, and we're going to show how we can transfer that philosophy of 2D silhouette, thumbnailing as we call it, into 3D. So can everybody see my screen? I hope so. I've changed to ZBrush. How am I doing for pace, Mike? Am I not going too fast? If I'm going too fast, I can slow down. I think the delay helps. Now, if you don't have ZBrush, don't panic. Just watch and be amazed. But just a quick rundown. ZBrush is, if you've never seen ZBrush before, it's pretty scary. There are menus all over the place. And oh, that's great. I lost my config. That's good. Okay. And there it is. It's back. Okay, cool. So ZBrush is a 3D sculpting package. If you didn't know that already. And if you've never seen ZBrush before, shame on you. No, not just kidding. But 3D ZBrush is a premier sculpting package. So what I mean is that it's very, very popular in all sorts of different industries. It's used in film, it's used in games, it's used in 3D printing, it's used in medicine, it's used in all sorts of different ways. And obviously it's used by people like me who teach and also do their own freelancing stuff. I do stuff for 3D printing, so I do sculptures for a guy who's doing a tabletop game, D&D type of thing. Anyway, ZBrush is quite unique though. It's a very unique package in terms of 3D. It doesn't work the same kind of way as Maya, and it is a sculpture. It is primarily a sculpting package, so it's not a animation package, for instance. It doesn't render in Arnold or stuff. It's very much its own kind of thing, but it does cross-pollinate quite well to other packages like Maya and stuff. So people in 3D and in movies and games will use a combination of different packages like Maya, ZBrush, Photoshop, and loads of other packages. Right, so here we are. So let me start from the beginning. Now, let me just make sure I've got nothing in the scene. Okay, so here we are with a blank slate in ZBrush. Now, I've got a bit of a unique layout. I've got my own custom palettes and stuff like that. Okay. Now, I don't want you to kind of get too worried about if I'm talking about things at the beginning that you don't understand. I'm just going to show you to get started what I do, how I get started. And there's also a new feature in ZBrush called ZModeler, which is very similar to a 3D process that you'll find in Maya, where you kind of take a cube and extrude it and make geometry that way. But I'm not really showing you that. I'm just showing you how you can utilize that to make silhouettes. So let's focus, and I'm just going to go and get this star shape here, drag that in, okay, and then to sculpt and do stuff onto this, I then need to go to the edit mode. Now, don't worry about following along, just watch what I do. But edit mode is important so draw mode is where you can draw stuff on the canvas, and that's fine if you want to make a postcard, Christmas card, hand done for your mum for Christmas, and make a screen grab of that. That's all that mode will do, basically. This is what we call 2.5D. Okay, but if you want to sculpt on objects, you need to then draw once, hit the edit button, and then when we're in sculpting mode. Okay, so that means I can edit this, I can do stuff to it. What I do now is I'm going to get rid of the star, or actually I'm going to convert it to a simple cube. And what I'm doing here is I'm going to generate a silhouette like we did in Photoshop before, but I'm going to do it in 3D rather than 2D. And I'm going to show you this really cool technique of doing that. So let's just convert this to what's called a cube, which means quick mesh cube. Okay, what that does, it converts that to this humble cube here. Very boring, I know, not very exciting. Okay, but it's our starting point. And just to confuse you some more, we have a thing in our palette in ZBrush called Subtool. And this is where we can put many different models in. So if we're working on a character and he's got plates of armor, he's got different objects, this is where they'll all fit. But we don't have to worry about that, because we're going to create all our stuff in this one Polymesh 3D here. Okay, so next thing, before I start duplicating this, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to start just changing the shape. So let's turn on the grid so I know which way I'm facing. So can be important. So if any of you aren't familiar with 3D, we have 3 axes of dimensions. So we've got up and down, left and right, and back to front or away. So up and down is what's called the y-axis. Side to side is the x-axis, and the z-axis, or the one that's depth going towards and away from us, is the z-axis. So I want to make sure that I'm facing the right way, and the way to do that is y is always pointing up, x is pointing side to side, and z is pointing to the front. So hopefully you can see that these little blue, these little axes lines. So we've got a blue z-axis, a green up-axis, and a red side-to-side x-axis. Okay, so that's cool. I'm going to turn on what's called symmetry, and I hit the X key to do that. And that means that when I sculpt on one side, it's going to update the other side. I'll probably want that on for the most part. Sometimes I can turn it off. But X is the button for doing that. And also you can do it through the transform menu and activate symmetry. And activate symmetry is the same as hitting X on the keyboard. And I can also change the axes of symmetry and do radial symmetry and cool stuff like that. Now what this does, as I was saying, is it lets me change the shape of my object symmetrically. Okay. So let's do that. I'm going to just undo that. Undo in ZBrush is Control Z. There's also a little slider up here. Now, brushes. So let's talk about brushes. Hit the B key and you'll get a terrifying menu come up, and that shows you all the different brushes you can use. This is just a small sample of the other brushes that are kind of hidden away, but the B key is the brush menu where you can change your brushes. I've got hotkeys set up so that I can have quick access. I've also modified my menu set down here so that I've got my own little access to other brushes that I can't fit on my hotkeys. Okay. Move topological we'll look at in a minute, but I'm going to use the move brush, and the move brush is one of my favorite brushes because I can quickly change the shape of this object. So I'm going to do that now, and I'm going to just quickly go in, and you can see how powerful this brush is. And I'm keeping this little cube very low res. It's very low res at the moment, and at this stage I'm not worried about what we call topology or topology. Topology is like the amount of, say, geometry you have that's making up an object. And at the moment, I've got a very low-res object, very, very low, very simple. And I want to keep it like that for the time being, because what I'm going to do is just block out basic shapes. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to create a little concept, and I'm going to turn off wireframe of some kind of character. And what I'm doing here is thinking about gesture. So I'm thinking about, remember those shapes we looked at earlier? And I'm going to create, this is like kind of like, so the head's going to be up here, this is the waist, this is the crotch down here, and the leg's going to be coming up. So what I'm doing is just working out a nice spinal gesture. So this is my torso. Okay. With me so far, so nothing too mind-blowing, I hope. I like to work with perspective on because it gives me an idea of what the dimension will look like in real world 3D, depending on what we're doing. Now the other cool thing with ZBrush is if I hold down Shift, I can snap to my camera view. So hold down Shift, I can snap to the left view, front view, top view, back view, bottom view, and so on. Very useful when I want to kind of work in a particular axis. So if I want to work on just the side view, the side axis, without messing around, without messing up the front view, I can just quickly change my stuff in here, but it hasn't changed anything from front view. Likewise, if I change anything front view, I can't mess up anything in my side view. May not make sense, but when you play with ZBrush, you'll see what I mean. So let's just block out basic spine shape. Okay, believe it or not, I created a back torso of character. I know it doesn't look like much. Right, now let's talk about the transpose tool. Transpose tool is something you'll begin to hate, but the more you use it, you'll love it. So we've got, at the moment we're in what's called draw mode, and that means I can utilize all my sculpting brushes, like sculpt, clay brushes, clay build up, all that kind of stuff. I can sculpt. The transpose tool is utilized using the move, scale, and rotate. So if I hit the move brush, I then get this little widget coming up, and this is what we call the transpose line. Okay, I'm going to turn off symmetry because, as you can see, I've got two lines coming out, and I just want to turn that off temporarily. Now what we'll see here is kind of a bit of a scary thing going on. We've got a line coming out, then we've got three circles, and then we've got a few green circles, and then we've got that, remember that axis I showed you earlier? We've got an XYZ axis. Okay. If I hit this blue one, which is it's going to snap my line just so it's facing on the axis of the Z. And if I hit the green one, it does the same there. Hit that one, it's going to turn there. So this is very useful for when we're using a transpose tool. So I can move this line, this transpose line around when I hit the larger circle, okay, and the middle one. So it needs to be the middle one. If I hit the larger circle at the end, I can drag out the actual length of the line. So this is something that you'll utilize the more that you use it, you'll understand it more. Okay, now to actually kind of move something, so at the moment, as you know, I'm in move. I can only move. I can't rotate, I can't scale. Well, I can kind of scale, I'll show you that in a sec. But if I hit this middle circle, this white one in here, I can now move my object. Let's turn my floor on. And you can see I'm moving my object in space. So when I want to reposition my object, I can move it. Now if I go into this view, I can move it arbitrarily in all the axes. Okay. But if I go to my side view, again we aligned that axis up in this direction. I'm only moving it in the X axis, right? Same with green. I'm only moving it in the Y axis. I can move it in the Z axis. So again, it's a bit of a tricky one. Now, if I move, as you can see, I've moved my object. My transpose line is down here. I can just move that up so it's closer to the object. Hit F to frame the objects. Okay. Now, what I'm going to show you is a cool way to quickly duplicate this object. So when I hold down Control, and then hit that middle one, I duplicate that object. And remember saying we're still in that one subtool. So now I've got a duplicate of that object. Okay. What I want to do is create two of these. So this is where symmetry comes into play. I've hit the X button. I can then duplicate. Oops, I'll do that. Two. Should be able to. At the same time. What I need to do is just adjust my transpose so it's not intersecting itself. And, oh, what am I doing here? Okay, hello. ZBrush is playing up. Okay. What I'll do is just turn off symmetry. And I'll show you how to quickly duplicate this rather than do it. So I'm going to turn off symmetry, it's playing up. I'm just going to duplicate that. And this is going to become my leg. So now, let me just go over that again. So what I did there, just reposition this, hold down, and you know, the transpose tool is a bit finicky, but you'll get used to it. When I hold down Control, hit the middle ring here, see how this is going white, and let go, I duplicate that object. So this is basically what it's doing. Okay, and I'm going to make a leg out of this one. How are we doing for time? Not too bad. Okay, so I've made a leg. I know it doesn't look like a leg, it's the same object. Now what's cool about this is that this one's masked. So then I can go back into Draw and I can then sculpt this. Okay. And I can reshape it. And what I'm going to do is use the Move tool. You can see how powerful the Move brush is. Sorry, not the Move tool. Yeah, the Move brush. And just sculpt that quickly. Go back to my transpose and reposition it. Turn off symmetry. Okay, and then I've got a leg coming along. Okay, and let's just try and do this quickly. So this is the process that we go through to quickly bang out our silhouette. Let's duplicate another one. Let's make the bottom leg. Go back to move. So when you duplicate this, you need to be in the move mode. So again, hold down Control, grab that out, and move that in. Okay, and that's my lower leg being formed. So now I can go back into Draw, and because these other parts are masked out, I can quickly go in there. Now I'm going to show you another important thing to do with this. So I'm just going to whack out one more, create a foot, and reshape a foot. Oh yeah, that's kind of cool. Okay, and I'm going to go back and modify these shapes using a trick in transpose, using the transpose tool. So move brush is great, it's so good. There's two ways I can do this. So if I deselect everything, everything's unmasked, so that means several things. If I want to modify the whole character, because this is all one subtool, I can quickly modify the whole character using the move brush. Okay, I'm going to make this symmetrical, so I'm going to duplicate this guy. Okay, let's just go and let's just modify. I need to just move them across so that we get a better. Right, I'm just going to just symmetry this guy over so we get another leg. I'm going to do that by using what's called under geometry. And this is where you're all kind of having breakdowns because you don't know ZBrush. But under the geometry, or you might do, but under the geometry rollout menu, okay, under there's one called Modify Topology, and in there is one called Mirror and Weld. Okay, what that does is it makes a symmetrical copy of your object. Okay, let me just modify that really quickly, and let me just make sure. One more thing I need to just check is the 0 position, and let's just try that again. Bear with me, folks. Now what I'm doing here, there's also, if you're as you saw earlier, I wasn't quite kind of symmetric, making this symmetrical before. So let me just adjust some of this. It might not work. Bear with it. Let's go back to geometry and weld. Oh yeah, I know what's happened there. So I just need to flip it again. Deformation. Don't worry if you don't know what I'm doing yet. It will all become clear. Okay. Let me just adjust this really quickly. One more time. There we go, that's better. So I just had to make sure that this was more or less aligned above the axis. So what I did there, I just used mirror and weld, and mirror and weld is really cool. It just quickly looks at your mesh and it mirrors it over to the other side. So now I've got two legs, and it's going to be a lot easier for when I make my arms now. Okay, so now I've got some two-legged thing. Now let's say I've unmasked everything, and I want to say move one of these objects without affecting the rest of it. So at the moment I can modify the whole thing, kind of cool, and change, you know, the gesture, you know, and do the whole thing like so. And I could, with the move brush, it depends how big the brush is. So if I want more local changes, I can just make the brush size smaller. But if I want to make really big sweeping changes to the entire mesh, I can make it really big, and it will change all the whole object. Very powerful way of working. So let's go back into this guy, and there's two ways I can just affect just one of these. So at the moment I've lost my mask, so that the mask enabled me to just work on one object without affecting the other ones. Really cool thing. If I go back to transpose, So go back to the move tool. Okay, where's my transpose line? And I can grab this. Okay, if I hold down Control again, and if I hover my mouse over a point on my mesh, it needs to be over a point, otherwise it won't work. You'll notice that it goes yellow. Okay, so when it goes yellow like that, that's a special thing. That means when I grab, I can grab and pull out my transpose line, and when it hits another object, it masks out all the other objects. So now I can either duplicate this one, and let's just do that. I'll duplicate it, I'll make some arms, and it hasn't affected the other objects. I'll just quickly rotate that up. Actually, let's move it across so it doesn't self-intersect. Okay, and same again. So let's do that again. Hold down Control, hover over a point on your mesh, pull out the transpose line until you hit another object, and it masks out the other objects. And then I'll hold down Control, go back to Move because I need to be on Move, and duplicate again that object. Pretty cool. So, got a question coming. Let me rotate that. So then I go into Rotate, reposition it. Really powerful, because that means I can duplicate really quickly those objects. I've got a question. 1 second. I'm just getting too much fun now. Right, let's see. Yeah, how do you quickly change the size of your brush? Good question. 2 ways. You can either hold down, just don't hold down, just hit the S key on your keyboard and you'll get the brush size slider come up. Alternatively, there's a draw size up here. Does the same thing. So the S key is the hotkey, which is a lot quicker because wherever your mouse is, you can just bring up the draw size, or you can do it up here on the draw size. Same thing, just different ways of getting to the same thing. Another way, hold down the space bar, you've got draw size in there as well. Okay. When you start sculpting, another one that you'll need to know about is, I need to be in sculpting. When you hit the U key, so when you're sculpting and moving stuff, there's a thing called Z intensity. That's the hotkey. That's how intense, that's how strong your sculpting brush is. So something that you need to be aware of. That's also found under here as well, under Z intensity. Okay, we won't have time to get too much into sculpting. I'm really just showing you this technique. So, very powerful technique. A lot of people don't know about this, would you believe? So I can quickly block out my basic forms, go back into draw mode, and because I've masked everything, I can quickly just then go in and move some of this stuff around. Okay, you know, and do that kind of thing. So if I want to go back, duplicate the start of the hand, go back to move. By the way, the hotkey for move, scale, and rotate is WER, rather than having to press the buttons. Is that cool? Okay, so let's duplicate another one. Control, middle click on the, middle circle, inner circle, drag out, and duplicate. I'm gonna quickly change the shape of that. Another cool thing you can do with the transpose line, if you click on one of the points, the transpose line will try and figure out which direction you want to go, but it will click on one of the normals. Hello. And with the move tool, you can with move selected, you can quickly scale the dimensions. It's an alternative to scaling. Very useful, but I didn't align that very well. But yeah, that will shrink or stretch the object along the axis, the aligned axis of your transpose line. So if I do it against here, it's going to do it against that way. Very useful if you want to quickly scale something down rather than having to go into scale. To go into rotate, I might want to rotate this around like so. Move. I'm going to swap these guys over and rotate. So this takes a little bit of time to get used to. You know, when I first started it, it was a little bit slow for me, but once you kind of get the hang of it, it's really, really powerful. Now, how are we doing? Well, we've got 15 minutes left. So, I'm just going to block this out a little bit better. Just bear with me. Now, another way that you can quickly sculpt on your mesh, on individual parts of this mesh, is what's called move topological. So we know about the move brush, that we can quickly change our silhouette, our shapes. Let's go to the move topological. So bring up the brush menu, hit the M key, and you'll find all the brushes begin with M. In this case, we've got move topological. Now, move topological works just like the move brush, except it only, depending on the size of the brush, it will only move those objects that you're sculpting on. Okay, I've got a duplicate here, for instance, and I'm just sculpting on there. Or if I just want to sculpt on this hand. So it's kind of like a smart move brush. You just click on the brush, on the object you want to sculpt, and it will only sculpt on those brushes. Very cool, because that means you don't need to kind of use the transpose brush to move stuff around and sculpt with. You can actually just go straight in with the move topological. Okay, let me just quickly move. I need to select and move out this guy. So make it yellow, hold down Control, click and drag. I'm just going to move that guy out of there. I'll turn that into a back foot or something. Rotate it up. Move it down. And oh, it's flipped up on itself. It's something weird. Move down. And you can be really rough, you can be really brutal. You don't worry about stretching your meshes, don't be too precious about it. Just be, treat these as kind of like almost, like the process in Photoshop where you're just thumbnailing. And the more you do this, the faster it will become. So let's just shrink this down really quick. Hope no one's fallen asleep. And I'm just going to quickly rotate this and move it. Okay. Alright, so just quickly I might want to adjust that. So let me just quickly go in. I'm going to just quickly use this, just change the silhouette of this guy. Something a bit more exciting. Okay, but you can see how quickly that blocked out basic mesh. So thinking, well, that's all very well and good. I'll just kind of adjust this. Now, one way, before I get into Dynamesh quickly, I'm trying to kind of get more of an exciting gesture going on. But I'm kind of creating some kind of mech or something, or mechanoid. Quite like this one. What you can do is, if you want to check the silhouette, which I like to do when I'm at this stage, there's a little color swatch here. You can make it black, and you can just check, just see how your silhouette's kind of looking. And you can get the idea that this is kind of like akin to the thumbnails that we were doing earlier in Photoshop. So let me just quickly just kind of join some of these guys up a bit. He's got no head. That's okay. Maybe we'll put one in. What I'll do for the head is I'll quickly duplicate the torso. And let's just quickly rotate that. Oops, turn off symmetry. Try that again, shall we? Oh, that's just my display playing up. Okay, move it around, and then I'll just go in and just adjust that. Oops, don't forget to turn on symmetry when you want to go back to symmetry. Sometimes you need to turn it back on and turn it back off and all that. So, and you can always tell it's symmetrical when you get two lines or two dots on either side. Okay, so let me just take this guy, and once you get fast at this technique, you'll find it's really, really fun to block out. Let me show you some examples that I did to block out some characters. So these are some silhouettes I did, all from the same subtools, and then just changing the gesture, changing the form, playing around, transpose, playing around with the sculpt, and just coming up with all these different combinations of. So these are all ideas, and what I did was, you block out some thumbnails, and then you think, okay, which one do I like? Well, I like a lot of them, but but I like maybe number 9. So I took number 9, and I'll show you what I did with number 9. And I like number 10, and I like number 1. And number 5 is cool, and then you turn those into you take them the next level up. So without further ado, Mike, how are we doing for time? I've got 10 more minutes. Is that right? Okay, so I'm going to just quickly show you 5 more minutes of ZBrush, and then I'll have time for more questions, I think, hopefully. So let's say that I'm happy. I'm pretty chuffed with this guy. I think he's kind of cool. And let me just sorry, I got distracted. Let me just show you what we can do with them. So what's cool about this, having it all as one subtool, is I can duplicate him really quickly. So I can just go in and I'm going to duplicate, and that way I'm not going to lose my original guy. But let's say I want to make some variations of this guy. I can quickly duplicate him, and then I can play around and make like I did just when I was showing you those other guys I did earlier. And I can maybe change the arms, change the proportions, and I can make a whole new character from this. So maybe go to move topological, change the head, symmetry needs to be on. Let's just bring the arms down, the body, or maybe let's make the body really big, the arms really long. I kind of like that head down there. I can shrink the head, play around with it until we get a completely different character. Not a good example, but you can quickly duplicate the original and make a completely different character from it. Let's go back to our original because I quite like what I had there. Right, and I'm going to duplicate it one more time. So quickly show you Dynamesh. Once you kind of reach this stage and you blocked out a very basic low poly version, we can then kind of do something cool with it. So let's go to Geometry, Dynamesh, and you'll see what Dynamesh does. Dynamesh does something really amazing. I'm going to take the resolution really low to something like 32, very low res. And the reason it's so low is it means it's really quick to work with. And at this stage, I'm still in the concept blocking out thumbnailing stage. So take the resolution down to 32, hit Dynamesh, and lo and behold, what it does is it fuses all those tools, all those shapes that we made, into one mesh. Well, that's cool. What can I do with that? You say, well, now I can have fun. And as it's all one mesh, turn on symmetry, that would help. I can then go into, and now I can now do my standard sculpting. So now I can turn that, and really this stage that I was showing you earlier, happy accident there, that might be kind of cool, those two holes, but I can get rid of those when I Dynamesh again. What's good about this is that there are other techniques for creating a base mesh in ZBrush. One is to get a sphere and pull out arms and legs, but you're always stuck with your. It's very difficult as you move along into your sculpt to change your proportions. But at this stage, we can really kind of we can really go in and say, before we even start sculpting, we can block out, we can look at our gesture, we can look at our proportions, and we can quickly change the proportions, the action almost of the character, and all that stuff really quick, really easy at that stage. It becomes harder once you start sculpting and getting into details, which hopefully you don't get into too early, afterwards, to change your proportions, because you have a much heavier mesh, as it were. So this is why we like to do this, because when we block out these individual pieces, it's so much easier just to kind of quickly go in and move stuff around. But when you Dynamesh out of a single sphere, pull out arms and legs, it's a lot harder to isolate those objects. Okay, so let's go back to that Dynamesh. And now I can then start sculpting. Let's get rid of those holes. They're gone. And I can put it nice and low res. And I can start. So at this point, I'm not worried about details or anything like that. I'm just still playing around with my shapes, because then I can once I've kind of got this overall silhouette locked down, just blocking in maybe some basic forms, so a few more. I can then increase the resolution and start kind of getting in. But I really like some of these shapes I'm getting in here. I kind of like this back is quite unusual. The sloping back, kind of coming back quite far. I kind of like that. I like the high shoulders. I can maybe improve the head, and I can still use all those tools. Maybe I can change the shape of the head. But as you can see, it's harder to change these overall shapes now, because I've gone into Dynamesh. When I Dynamesh, I'm now into kind of sculpting the surface stuff. Okay. Alrighty, so let me just show you my. I'm going to save this off because I kind of like where that was going. Let me just go into my. Go into my Dropbox. Just put those in silhouettes. Okay, and I'll just show you a version of something that's a bit more finished, which went through this entire process. So let's just go up into Evil Chihuahua. Okay. Let me open up Evil Chihuahua. Change material. Alright, so this is a character concept that I'm working on for class, and this is my idea is to there's a bit of a long story, I won't go into it, but merge one of those neurotic, paranoid, schizophrenic dogs, Chihuahua, and turn it into a horrible monster. So this started off exact same process. So this is the blockout stage, not this one. Very rough. Then I roughed in some very basic anatomy. So this started life, same process where I just blocked in those basic shapes, and then Dynameshed it all together like you've just seen. And then let's get rid of this guy. And then I upresed it. And then I'm starting to block in my, the actual surface shapes. Great technique, because it really does free you up to not get bogged down. You can sort out your, you can solve those problems that you get with proportion and gesture early on. So this guy started life as number 9 here. So that early thumbnail. because I really like the pose. But I thought, what am I going to do with that? You know, am I going to turn it into a, you know, an alien or a zombie, or and I decided to have this idea of, hey, I hate chihuahuas. I'm going to turn it into a horrible chihuahua creature, and that's what I did. So he's coming on quite nice. But you know, as I was saying, when you do this technique of blocking in your thumbnail, your silhouette early on, you know, you've really kind of like blocked in that. You've solved a lot of those problems early on, and you don't have to go in, because when it's heavy like this, it's a lot more harder to change those silhouettes. You can still do it, but it's painful sometimes. Okay, so I think that's all we've got time for. It's coming up for 12:30 now. If you've got any questions, I have a bit of time to, you know, answer some questions, and then we can end the session. Is that cool, Mike? It's so weird doing this because I don't hear anything the other end. But I hope that was really useful for you guys. I haven't even shown some of my full-time students this technique. It's been around for a while. It's not new, but I really love it. As I was saying, there's other ways of creating your base mesh, your topological, but I love this technique because it really frees you up to just concentrate on those general forms very early on, solve some early, you know, problems of proportions, that kind of thing. Okay, any questions before we close the session? I hope you found that useful. I hope you didn't get too stuck in ZBrush. I have a question. Yeah, that would be good, wouldn't it? I was just thinking that myself. I don't know, we'd have to ask. I would love to do one. We can go a bit deeper into ZBrush and sculpting, and maybe come up with a finished concept piece. So the idea is to turn this into a you know, a finished concept, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, I would love to do another follow-up workshop. I'll have to talk to Michael about maybe when we can do that. I don't know if that's possible, but yeah, we shall see. So maybe ask Mike about that one. Yeah, possibly. I'm keen anyway. All right, anything else? Cool. This guy is going to be worked on a lot more, so hopefully I'll be able to show you guys the finished product. You know, it's going to look pretty cool, I think. Pretty creepy, pretty weird. But yeah. Okay. Any other? Okay, we might have another question coming through. Yep. Oh, all good. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. All right, guys. So, can you see that? Is that on the right screen? Yep. Can you see that? Okay. I think you can. Okay. All right. Good. Can you see that? Okay. I think you can. Should be able to. Oh, which? Okay, good. All right, awesome. Okay, great. So I think that wraps it up, guys. Thank you very much for your time, your attendance, whatever. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got something out of it. And we shall maybe have a follow-up. I don't know. If you've got any questions, maybe ask Mike, and then he can send me through. If you've got any questions later on, he can send me through the you know, questions. So if you have any more questions, please send them through. Okay, I think we're going to finish now, aren't we? Cool. Okay, all right. Thank you very much, guys. And really enjoyed that. And maybe see you soon. Okay, cool. All right.